Hi, in this short demonstration, I'm going to show you how you can use the Cloud-init capability included within OCI to automate the configuration of a virtual machine once it's been created. Now, this is really useful because it means that when you provision a VM, rather than having to log onto it manually and make any manual configuration changes, you can actually just provide a script to OCI and it will run that script once the VM instance has been created and do all the work for you. In this specific case, I'm going to provide a Cloud-init script that installs a web server on my local machine, opens up the relevant firewall ports, so in this case port 80, and then lastly creates a landing page for that website, which will then demonstrate me accessing that later on in the demonstration. So first things first, we will go to compute and then instances within OCI, and I'm going to provision an instance within my demo compartment. So I'll select create instance, and then I will give it a name. So I'm going to call this web server, as it will be a web server. Now I'm going to leave the standard image, which is Oracle Linux 9. Other Linux images can be used, of course, and also the configuration in terms of OCPUs and memory. The defaults are absolutely fine for this demonstration. The interesting piece is if we go into advanced options and scroll down a little bit further, you've got this option here called initialization script, which allows you to either provide a Cloud-init script file, or you can just paste the commands that you want OCI to run after the VM has been provisioned into here. So what I'm going to do is select paste Cloud-init script, and then I'm going to copy the script that I want OCI to run after the VM has been provisioned. So we'll pop that in here, and basically what this script does, installs a web server, it makes sure that web server is enabled, it adds port 80 inbound to the firewall so we can actually get access to the web server, restarts the firewall, and then creates a homepage that essentially just says hello world. So pretty basic, but it's a really good demonstration of how you can avoid having to manually log on to servers and make configuration changes. You can basically get OCI do that for you. Now, once we've specified the script for it to run, we then need to go through and do any other configuration for the VM. So in this case, the VM is going to be put into a virtual cloud network that I have, and it will also be put into a public subnet. Reason being, it's a web server, it needs to be available publicly, so it needs a public IP address. Now, once we have done that, we then need to provide an SSH key for the machine itself. So what I'll do is upload my key file that I'm going to use for authentication, which I'll just drag across to here. And then essentially, we're just going to go with the default settings for everything. Now, what will happen in the background now, my VM will be provisioned as normal. However, the Cloud-init script that I provided will be run when the instance spins up for the first time, which means that, rather than me having to log onto the machine and make any manual configuration changes, I can batch them all up, have a consistent managed script that I could manage in version control. Particularly useful when you've got lots of VM instances to provision because it saves things like human error and lots of manual effort. Now we'll wait for that VM instance to provision. We can now see that it is up and running. However, there's one configuration change we need to ensure that we have in place to make sure that we can actually get access to this across the internet. So if we go to the details page of the web server, we can see that it's up. If we go to networking, what we need to just quickly take a look at is the subnet that it's contained within. Make sure that allows inbound port 80 access. So if now I'm within the subnet that VM's been provisioned within, I'm going to hit the security tab, and then I'm going to take a look at the security list that we have. And let me edit that. We've got that security list. Yep, that's correct. Let me go into the list and just have a look at the rules that we've got. So what I have already put in here, which you may need to do depending on what you're doing. In my case, I'm only doing this because I'm provisioning a web server. I've added an entry in the security list that basically says my public IP address is permitted to connect to port 80. Now, obviously, the only reason for me doing this is because I'm provisioning a web server, but obviously, depending on what you're doing, you need to make sure that there are any other services in OCI configured appropriately, such as security lists, network security groups, zero trust packet routing. Any other supporting services obviously need to be configured, which can be automated too. Now, if we go back to the VM instance that I have just provisioned, we should have a public IP address for it. Now, if I take that public IP address and I paste that into a browser, what should now happen, I'm just going to need to force this to run over HTTP, is if I browse there, I should get hello world. So there we go. We can see as part of the process lifecycle of provisioning a VM, we can get OCI to do some of the heavy lifting for us. Hopefully you found this useful. Thanks a lot for watching.